Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Cybrary Intruder Alert podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Hutchins, and some of you may know me as Malware Tech from social media platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. And today we've got some pretty interesting topics coming up. We're going to be talking about, does TikTok spy on you? Is it a national security threat? And should it be banned? We're also going to be talking about the AI developments and the IT job market. If you're new here, which hopefully you are, because we haven't actually filmed any episodes yet, and time travel scares me, we are going to be recording all episodes live, so you can tune in on, I believe, YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn. So also make sure to subscribe on those channels so that you never miss an episode. And I'm here with my co-host Matt Mullins, who I'm going to let introduce himself.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, Matt Mullins. My background is I'm a red teamer and red team manager for a number of years. I've worked pretty much in a different, I guess, silo than yourself in the sense of I went through the corporate structure of help desk farm, and then I went to incident response for voice networks. And then from there, pivoted over to application security and pen testing, and then finally into red teaming for a lot of large companies / organizations that you probably have heard about or seen in your everyday life if you're, looking what's in your wallet or something like that. A lot of certs too that, vary wildly. So yeah, I'll throw that out there as well.
So pretty much the opposite background to me. I don't think I have any qualifications at all. I took an IT diploma in well, it would have been, I think, the English version of high school, maybe.
Mm.
Didn't go down so well. Was very very boring. Ended up, I think, getting my first job straight out of high school and going from there. So very different background, and I'm definitely impressed with anyone who can do help desk. I don't think I can handle the stress, honestly.
It's pretty brutal to your point. Like I just remember there were a number of awkward conversations that I had because it was my first real job where I was on the phone. So, you're young, like you're on the phones, and then like someone's like, "Hey, I need you to help me fix this thing." You're like, "Cool, I've got you." And then the call quickly descends into chaos, and they're telling you that they're going to come down to the corporate office and they're going to punch you in the face, and you're like, "Cool, I'd love to see you do that." And then the call ends, and then your manager peeks their head around the cubicle. This was at Circuit City, like years and years ago. They're not even around, obviously, anymore. And they were like, "Yeah, you can't tell customers to come and try to punch you in the face. Like that's we're getting you for that." So, a lot of a lot of awkward conversations for that. The mission control / incident response stuff that I did was pretty funny too, because one of the first like moments on the job, like one of the first nights, because it was overnight, right? And we had all the systems go down, including the Cisco VoIP phones and stuff like that. And so I'm like brand new, and I'm like, this is my first security job. So cool. How do I open up a GEM bridge, a general incident management bridge, if the phones don't work? And like the senior on call with me was just like, I don't know, I guess we just sit here and wait. So spicy.
Yeah. I've never actually done incident response. Well, not officially, but I actually had someone tell me their first incident response job was for the NHS during WannaCry, and
Oh, dude.
that has got to be a trial by fire. It's like, yeah, your first day on the job, North Korea has decided to ravage your country's healthcare system. Good
Yeah.
luck.
Good luck. Have fun.
I think I would have quit, to be honest. That would be, I'm not cut out for this.
I'm out later. Yeah, it's any of those roles, especially when you're on call for something critical. Like there's been incidences that I've helped work from the offensive side, like Log4j. That was just
That was a
whew.
nightmare.
Yeah, man. And then like you're the technical expert on the offensive side. So like people are like, what do we validate our testing for? And you're like, well, let me find out. I'm literally dropping into this with you all. And there's a lot of eyes locked on you, asking like, how do you make this work? How do you get this POC to work? And then whatever organizational limitations you might have, like because I think Hunters came out with like a good tool initially, right, when
Oh,
it first
yeah,
came out.
yeah.
And a lot of organizations went to it, but then there was a lot of other organizations based off of the way that they sat with the government or whatever, where they couldn't actually use that tool because they're afraid that there was, what if they get breached, right? And then whatever else. So there's a lot of craziness associated with that. So yeah, always a good time trying to put out the fire.
Oh yeah, I got pulled onto Log4j as well, and
Oof.
oh my god, that was a nightmare. It was like right before Christmas, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
It was like a week or two before Christmas, and I remember someone actually asked me quite recently. They were like, "When do you think Log4j will be like finally patched on all the systems?" And I'm like, honestly, the heat death of the universe probably, because
Yeah.
those kind of things go away around for a while. Like we're still dealing with the config bug, the decom one from 2008. Like there are still systems vulnerable to that, and with like
Yeah.
something as deeply integrated as Log4j, I don't think we'll ever see the end of that one.
Yeah, no, I think you're 110% right, man. Like, I mean, when you think about how people spin up things in general, I mean, sure, you could think about like the perimeter, right? Perimeters usually there's a little bit more scrutiny, but internal to networks and things like that, I guarantee, like it's like
Yeah,
middleware issues, right? Middleware issues will never ever go. Misconfigurations for middleware will never go away. Like they'll always exist. To your point, like those things.
yeah. I think like the big thing is it was a library, so it's not like they can just update the software. It's like everyone who uses that library has to individually update their software. They have to push out the software, and then
Mhm.
every single customer has to reinstall it. And it's like that's just never going to happen.
No, no, never. And then to your point too with that, like with the updates, I mean, goodness gracious, like outdated components and like vulnerable components has been like OWASP or like under the scrutiny of like pen testing like departments slash teams for how many years now? How many decades now? Like, good
Yeah,
luck.
it's an uphill battle. So we got our first topic, which is the one everyone loves, TikTok.
Mm,
So if you have somehow managed to evade the talk of this every day for the last 2 years, TikTok is a social media platform. It it's kind of like the Instagram Reels or the YouTube Shorts.
yeah.
It's owned by a Chinese company, and there's been a lot of discussion around. Firstly, is it spying on users? Is the app gathering data that it shouldn't? Is it putting American users at risk? And then there's kind of a second ongoing debate as well about whether the app is a national security problem.
Mm,
So I guess we start off with thoughts on that.
yeah. I mean, so here's the thing for me personally, like I'm like a little bit of a tinfoil hat when it comes to social media in general. Like, you look at all the permissions that apps have, right? It's like, oh, we want to access your microphone. We want to access your location. We want to access, the keypad or your browser history or your calendar or, your contacts or notifications. And I think that a lot of people, even when I want to say when like Android phones first came out, people were aware of, hey, this is suspicious. Why does my flashlight application that I use to, use the flash to light up the room for that was a built-in feature? Why does that need to access my location, right, or something like that? So I think we're kind of like numb to that, in my opinion. A lot of the access requests and things like that. Because think about like Facebook, just Facebook alone. I mean, super cookies like are still a thing. I'm pretty sure. Like, and like no one talks about them. So like when I personally think about TikTok and I think about what it does, like short form media, like you were saying. I mean, and okay, so we got a lot of apps that can do that. There's YouTube Shorts. There's all sorts of things, but yet this one particular application is getting a lot of scrutiny. So, I don't know, all social media is bad in my opinion. I like it. I mean, it's a necessary evil, right? Because you have to be able to contact people.
Yeah. I kind of lean towards the all social media is bad, but also it's a kind of bad I'm okay with accepting. I actually
Yeah.
remember I think it was Facebook. Like something absolutely blew my mind when I first heard it, and it's that Facebook has like they have like a package that a lot of sites deploy. So like every single site you go to probably reaches out to Facebook, and if you're logged into your Facebook, it isn't just tracking you on Facebook. Like any site you go to while logged into Facebook, and also while logged out, it can track your IP as well. So they actually
Mm,
like essentially have your browsing history, and like that blew my mind. But then, kind of, my personal argument is that that is the business of social media, right?
sure.
They gather a lot of user data and then they sell that off to advertisers, and that's how they make money. And of course, if the issue was user privacy, then we'd kind of be expecting to see some laws that say, "Hey, this is what you can gather, this is what you can't gather." but we're not seeing that. In fact, let's assume TikTok is actually banned.
Hmm.
Well, they can just go and buy that data from one of the other social media platforms, one of their
Exactly.
data brokers. So it definitely feels like the privacy aspect is kind of smoke and mirrors, given that there has been no proposed legislation to stop any social media platforms from gathering data.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that one as well. Because, I mean, if it was really about privacy and protecting the individual, right, and you know, being tracked and things like that, I mean, surely there'd be some sort of ramifications for that for a lot of the organizations that are already out there. I mean, I think that there's some uncomfortable truths also with when we think about social media. Again, tinfoil hat as well. When we think about like government tracking and things like that, like there's so much juicy information that's useful, I'm sure, to them, where maybe it's an issue. This has rang the bell because they wouldn't play ball the same way that Facebook would. I'll
It's
be that
certainly
guy.
possible. No, I definitely, yeah, because like the US is kind of, I mean, they're used to having control over like pretty much every big social media platform is American run.
Hmm.
And TikTok is like the wild card. It's the first time China has had like a major social media platform that is popular with like Western users.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing I was going to say too is think about Zoom. I mean, Zoom when it first came out, one was just crazy vulnerable.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
there's just stuff like popping up left and right. Like you can send a link and then you can get an NTLM relay out of it. And you're like, wait, what? For Zoom? But what was so interesting about it is I was reading an article a long time ago. So I don't know if this is currently valid, but essentially someone who did some sort of tracking on the way the traffic would move to Zoom's servers or something like that, and they said that they had discovered that a lot of the traffic is routed through China, like intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah,
And
I heard
so,
that too.
yeah, so like I think that's a really interesting, awkward comment in the room because a lot of people use Zoom. So we're really worried about TikTok and like the Chinese government spying on like, American citizens potentially or the privacy associated with it, but like route all of our traffic on Zoom, which has access to your microphone through China. It's totes legit. Let's go for that.
Yeah, it feels very tunnel vision. Like I don't want to be the tinfoil hat guy, but I feel like there is a little more to it because they have kind of singled this app out.
Yeah.
Um, like the European Union has GDPR. I think California has its own equivalent of the privacy law. And the US, what does the US have? Well, I don't think there's even a minimum price for how much my data is worth.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that one. And the GDPR thing too, like I think there was a lot of hope when it was first being rolled out that it was going to impact the global market in such a way that people would essentially become blanket compliant with GDPR, in some sense. And so American users would reap the benefits per se of that. But obviously that's not entirely true in a lot of senses. So I
Sounds
digress.
a bit like trickle down economics there.
Yeah.
Don't think that's going to work. But yeah, then there's the other angle, which I do digress with. I think the privacy angle is very much we're just fixating on this one app because we can. And then you have the national security angle, which is TikTok could be used to influence users. I think I heard like the last stat I heard was something like 150 million Americans are on TikTok, which blew my
Wow.
mind because that's like half of America. And I always
Yeah.
thought it was like the Gen Z app, like anyone above like the age of 25 isn't on there. But apparently it's very commonly used by a lot of Americans, and they're worried that China could kind of quietly push out propaganda through the app. Um, but of course, like my argument is like, do we put people in jail because they could commit a crime? Like, do we go, well, you are physically capable of robbing a bank, so we're going to put you in jail? No, like we use could as a way to prepare for would. Like if we think it could push propaganda, then that's a good reason to watch it more closely and see if they do that. But like straight out banning it because they could do something but aren't seems a little bit crazy. And then you've kind of got the whole Second Amendment, sorry, the First Amendment, where they don't really have any ability to regulate their own platforms. Like the US government cannot interfere in free speech, which means they can't tell Twitter what
Yeah.
tweets to delete. They can't tell Facebook what posts to delete. So China could literally just come along, sign up to Facebook, start posting whatever they want, and we would have a hard time getting rid of it because there is no
Yeah.
law that allows the government to censor social media. So, like, if I was China, I wouldn't even really bother with TikTok. I would just sign up a Twitter account or something.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of conversation with you know, not getting pulled into like the conversation about politics and like social media, but like, a lot of points have been made about influence that have been made, you know, to drive political opinion. And it's a
Mm,
great it's a great point that you're making, because if that was really the vector that they were going to use, why would they spend all the dev time to like
yeah.
create an application and spend millions of dollars hiring people to maintain infrastructure when they could literally just like go on Facebook and post a bunch of, well, I think blah 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 blah. I hope my candidate wins, and like here's some
Yeah.
cheap inkwell T-shirts or something like that you can buy that support my cause.
Yeah, I mean, like it's cheap. Like you can it's not primarily for like propaganda purposes, but you can bulk buy active social media accounts. I think it's
Yeah,
something like a couple of dollars for thousands of them. So it's like, do I pay a couple of dollars for 1,000 Facebook accounts, or do I spend like $1 trillion making the world's most
yeah,
popular social media platform and
yeah.
then set it on fire?
Yeah, and even to your point, like there's no way. I mean, I'm sure there's a degree of control you could have based on the objective, but it would be extremely difficult to make something viral, right? That is that popular as a platform. You're competing against Facebook, Instagram, all those other, YouTube and things like that. Those types of media formats, and they're not all like apples to apples. But the point being that you're punching up,
Mm,
against the heavyweight contenders. That's very difficult to do. So again, to your point, to engineer something solely for the purpose of, espionage or, cultural derailment or something crazy like that, that seems like a very, very, very long shot. That's a heck
mm.
of a Hail Mary to put all your eggs in that basket versus just going on and, search engine optimization poisoning, to some degree, or like, just posting on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, and we
Same thing.
like we know for a fact that the second they do something like that, the app is just going to get banned. So it would be a really massive cost to take on for like what 5 minutes of fame, and then the app just gets removed from the app store.
Yeah. And, another thing too, with your point that you've made, something I was thinking about. I had heard kind of in the buzz and like social media or something like that, where people are saying, well, TikTok in China displays, kids like videos that are like
Mm,
aligned towards like science and being an astronaut. And in America, it's like not so much. And they think that, the perspective that they're building is that, oh, well, look, they're pushing their population to pursue STEM, and they're pushing for our population not to. And, there could be a degree of governmental control, to your point, where it says like, hey, we have like a certain line in the sand where we don't want anything um, targeting children to be advertised in this way. And maybe we need to up the ante in regards to the protection of kids online in general when it comes to social media. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that there's not really anything around that when there's studies apparently linking, like last I checked, linking that it has an impact on like young girls especially.
yeah.
Whereas cereal and like the sugar content in cereal and like the dyes associated with that has an impact on children and their development, like that's regulated, right? And like it's just kind of interesting that we don't have that approach to social media when, like you were saying, nearly half of Americans have social media
Yeah,
or have
I've always
TikTok.
been very shocked by that. Like, I remember when I first signed up on TikTok, my very first TikTok live, it automatically put a filter on my face, and it made my jawline sharper and my skin perfect. And I was just thinking to myself, firstly, I don't want this. I'm beautiful as I am. And secondly, that's really harmful. Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
nobody you've ever seen on TikTok actually looks like that. They're like automatically making people look like 10 times better than they actually look. And I was like, that has got to mess with people's psychology.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, that alone. I mean, having a daughter like that. I'm like worried about that in the background, like, oh, social media, because they're going to be exposed to it. To your point, and if that's like the default filter, I mean, what does that say about like, image and personal beauty standards and things like that? I mean, that's obviously going to derail that whole natural development and maturity that's associated with that. Like, hey, this is what I look like. I'm okay with this. Like, or like you're
Mm.
there, I look good, like so.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very concerning. And on the topic of concerning, we have the AI stealing jobs. So with the advance of ChatGPT and GPT-focused AIs in general, a lot of people are worried that engineers and people in the technology sector are going to be pushed out. They're going to start just replacing jobs with AI, and they won't have need for workers anymore.
Yeah, that's another interesting one. I mean, what strikes me the most interesting about ChatGPT and about that process is, to me, I've always thought of it as a really nice tool. Like you can give it like basic prompts for scripts, and it will give you a script. And then usually, if you get a script, you want to read through it anyways, like, and you want to modify it, and you want to, make sure that it runs well, it fits the actual need, because there are still errors that ChatGPT spits out. Um, but the weird part is like, and I'm sure you probably noticed this by playing with it. Sometimes you'll give it a prompt and it will give you kind of the same style of text, kind of regurgitated in different ways. And so when I hear that, some jobs are going to inevitably be impacted with automation. That's just technology. Technology kind of changes the way we work in general. But like, a lot of this stuff, I'm sure there will be in the future, and I know that there's research that's been going on right now for detection of AI modifications of videos and text and things like that. So, you know, it's going to take some jobs out. It probably will create a bunch of jobs, in some senses, I would imagine.
Yeah, like I picked up on the same thing you did. I think I asked it to write an essay, and the
Mhm.
essay was really just the same sentence rephrased about 15 different times. And I
Yeah,
was
like,
like, oh wow, it can imitate me trying to give a speech with ADHD. It's like it's a cool thing, but I don't know that most people want this.
yeah,
But I think I'm kind of on the fence about whether it's going to be a negative or a positive. I think it really depends on how fast it evolves,
true.
because like with normal automation, it evolves slow enough that we can find the people who do get laid off new jobs, or they can retrain to other industries or whatever. But
Mhm.
if there was like suddenly explosion where like, okay, all of tech is now redundant, I don't think we would have the infrastructure to handle that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too about the infrastructure side, because when I think of infrastructure and like the big ripples that have been made recently has been cloud. A lot of people going from local infrastructure and the care and feeding of legacy systems to just forklifting everything in the cloud. And that did change a lot, but we still have a need for Cisco certified internet engineers.
Mm.
Like those roles are out there right now, and they still probably pay pretty well. So, I think that your perspective on it as kind of being on the fence, I think, is a wise one to take, because again, there's a lot of great things it can do. There's going to be a lot of things it disrupts. Like, I think it's very interesting that the the kind of, here's a problem, can you please create a script that fixes this problem? I mean, those interview processes are essentially like kaput, right? Because now someone can just plug it in and then just kind of, let me just angle it a little bit so that it fits, and then there you go. It's not a square peg in a square hole. It's a round peg with some sides that have been shimmed up, but it works. And, that was already a problem before, as I understand, with interviews, where I've seen videos of people essentially on a phone call, and they would like talk like that. And then someone would be on speakerphone next to the computer answering the questions as doing whatever. So people are going to game the system anyways, right? So these impromptu coding projects and things like that, it's going to put more of the onus onto the interviewees, not the interviewees, the interviewer, to ask more in-depth questions and have a more human experience, which I think is ultimately good, right? Because I don't know if you've ever seen this, but like you get either those basic coding style, like here's a project, solve this basic math problem using like C or C++ or PowerShell or whatever, or you get a CTF and it's like you have 48 hours to try to like attack this Node.js application or something.
Yeah, I've actually there was a I think there's a subreddit for it's not for it wasn't for ChatGPT. It was a little before GPT. It was like during COVID when all the exams moved online and they were like proctoring them via
Yeah.
webcams. And there was this entire subreddit for just like hacking the system, just coming up with these super creative ways to cheat on the exam, which like you would have like I think like some they would make you set up like multiple cameras. They'd make you have like a mirror behind you so they can see your screen. And
Yeah.
then there were people like using like capture cards to take feed like pre-recorded feeds from their PC, and then just sitting and googling all the questions in the exam. It was incredible.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, people are going to find creative ways to work around systems, like systems intended to restrict no cheating, please. And then, it's like the kid you knew in school who would like write the answers on like their pen or like on pieces of paper,
Mm.
really super small. And they're sitting here like going like, what was, so
I
it's
mean,
going to
that's
be,
pretty much our job is to subvert systems.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
Um,
like I kind of like one of the big things I've been seeing is like ChatGPT will replace programmers because it can program. But I'm like, I've been playing with it a lot, and I'm like, well, I still have to explain the application I want. I can't just
yes.
say make a chat application. I have to say I want a chat application that looks like this, uses this protocol, uses this
Yeah.
encryption, blah 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 blah. And that is just programming. It's literally just programming via an AI prompt.
Yeah.
And personally, I think we'll see, like maybe we start. Essentially, it becomes a programming language. We start seeing people, instead of writing like Node or Python or PHP or C++, they write ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point in the sense of it being essentially an interface, right? To get the query out, to get the information, because anybody who's done any sort of development work or wrote any code can tell you with a fair degree of honesty that essentially you Google it and you go to Stack Overflow. That's like the classic joke, right? So like I need to do something that I have no idea how to do, that's outside of kind of like my wheelhouse that I've worked in. How the heck do I even do that? And so that just accelerates that and kind of brings up in my mind some of the concerns that I've heard people talking about is that it's going to impact companies like Google a lot, right? Because now you don't need to go to Google and be like, type this in and then modify the query and modify the query. You can just be like, what is X? And then on the screen,
Yeah.
right? Which would be nice.
Oh yeah. I'm looking forward to it personally. Like we struggle with like we have a decent number of developers, but it's so hard to churn out like all the code we need in such a short period of time. And it would
Mhm.
be great if every developer was like 50 times faster.
Yeah. To your point, 50 times faster, and then the efficiency, right? So now the need for a more senior slash tenured developer will probably be further up because now you have individuals who might be able to query and put it together, but then someone to be able to look at that macro level and be like, okay, this isn't compiling. The junior developer doesn't understand why. They basically made the queries to ChatGPT and got the code. The code at face value looks really good, but there's compile errors and they don't understand what they mean, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could probably put that into ChatGPT and it could spit out like, oh, it's because of this, or you could give it the code and it might be able to assist further. But still, at the end of the day, like you're probably going to need some sort of perspective on what the code does, what the actual like reusable modules within the code do, and have them documented correctly. Because I mean, component lifecycle management is like a whole industry, right? Like CLM Nexus and other products, like literally made around that one aspect that exists solely because you have to be able to track that and track what it does, and keep some sort of inventory.
Yeah, it's like I've actually noticed a lot of like you get these videos and they're hyping up ChatGPT and they're like, here's how I wrote blah 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 with ChatGPT, and I look at the code and I'm just like, this code would like it physically does not work. It would never
Yeah.
compile, and you realize that they've like jammed a query into ChatGPT. It spat out some code, but because they don't actually know how to code, they're just like, yep, looks good to me.
Yeah. Here you go, all done.
Yeah, so I definitely think what will happen is a lot of the people like maybe the bar will drop for like the lower level, like what we would call senior developers, and they will just be people like just bunging queries into ChatGPT, and then the experienced developers it'll be their job to review the code and be like, this like does or doesn't work. Here's how to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely think that is going to be, and invariably, I can't imagine any other way, because in some senses, to the point that we were talking about earlier with Google and Stack Overflow and things like that, that's kind of what the seniors essentially did. The lower levels would try to figure out how to solve this basic modular issue before they did their push to Git or whatever, and
Mm.
then there's going to be some sort of review. I mean, think about also with application security and code review in general. I mean, really, what is that doing? You've got your code, you're creating it from nothing, right? And then just kind of shoving it up into the repository, and then the repository itself can be scanned by any number of products, and that's getting further left in application security, right? So I think you're really
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, like I actually did a test with that. I was basically just I was playing like non-security developer, just someone who doesn't have a background in cybersecurity, and I was just asking ChatGPT to write me certain applications, and I noticed that it didn't take security practices into account. Like it
Ooh.
would, yeah, it would put out insecure by default code. I remember I wrote a PHP website, and I said make it so this website only allows you to upload text files, and it did like it used the mime type check from the client side, and I was like, oh my god,
Goodness.
yeah, this is gonna set security back like 20 years.
Yeah, and I guess it's what's the line from Major Payne? Killing is my business and business is good. Like, security's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I took a look at it and I was like, job security.
Yeah. But again, like people are going to be using that, right? To answer interview questions. They're going to be using it probably to put stuff out there. And if there's not a watchful eye, that's going to end up. I mean, maybe we'll return to the wild west of like the '90s, where perimeter security was like, "Hey, man, I just uploaded a web shell, got him, coach." Like
I mean, that feels how it does go. It's like like one day they decided, okay, IoT, we're gonna put computers in your fridge, and then they
yeah,
just forgot all of the decades of cybersecurity knowledge and just started from zero. It's like we're just gonna have a Linux terminal with a telnet and no password, and then it was like, oh, cool, I'm good for another 30 years of job security.
yeah, dude, you nailed it. There was one of my buddies when I was over at Capital One. He basically said like, man, IoT is great. It's like hacking in the '90s. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, man, don't let it intimidate you, especially if you can actually get on it. You want to write some exploit code because at that time, like ARM didn't have like a ton of defenses in and of itself. So it's like sweet buffer overflow.
Yeah, and you're just done. Like where I used to live, my landlord, they turn up one day and like I came home and my door locks were gone, and I have like this digital smart lock, and
Yeah.
it I believe it communicates via like that low energy Bluetooth thingy
Mhm.
to what is essentially just a Linux server that just sits in my house. Like it's a little box they give you, and it's a Linux server. So of course, me being me, I pulled the top off the server, I took out the SD card, I imaged the OS, and I was going through it, and I'm like, okay, this thing doesn't have ASLR. It has like no stack execution prevention.
Oh
It
my
has
gosh.
absolutely zero security whatsoever, and it's listening on GSM. Like it has a GSM. It's essentially like a base station.
Yeah.
And so I looked at the GSM chip, and I'm like, oh, this is vulnerable to broad porn. Like you could literally walk up with a phone, get remote code execution on this box, and then just unlock all the doors. And I was like, oh my god, I hate this.
Technology. Ugh, I'm gonna go become like a
Yeah.
Luddite. Live on a farm, grow a beard.
I'm kinda at the point where I can't decide what's worse, like physical locks that you can pick or like digital locks that you can also pick.
Yeah. Ah, man. And the thing that's the most troubling for me on that front is when there is a push for things like biometrics and like gun safes. I see you laughing because like you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. It's like biometric lock and this and that and this and that. And like they always show up in talks where like someone's like, yeah, cool. You can just like literally jam your fingers on it 6 times and it'll just open. And I'm just thinking like, and people are like storing like firearms in that like they could have children. Like it's just to your point, like security, right? Like what?
Yeah, like I've always been a big hater of biometrics. Like the whole like fingerprint sensors, it's like great. We're gonna have passwords, but these passwords are on sticky notes that you stick on every single thing you've ever touched in your life, and
Yeah,
someone can just come along and pick up that sticky note and they have your password. Like that is our new idea for security.
yeah. And what could go wrong, right? What's wrong with that? Just roll a new password. Wait.
Yeah. Just you just like get a little bit of a knife, carve some new fingerprints in. It won't hurt too much.
Yeah, was it Total Recall or whatever, where they have the guy's eye on like the knife and he like holds it up to
Oh.
the scanner? Was it Demolition Man is what I'm thinking of. It's Demolition Man,
Yeah,
sorry.
I've seen that one. But then I remember what was the first one? It was like voice ID. Like they introduced this, I think it was like late 90s, early 2000s. And I took one look at it and I'm just like, there's no way you cannot recreate someone's voice from a
Yeah,
recording. Like there's no way. And
yeah,
surprisingly, it took a long time. It's like it was only this year that someone actually managed to break that system with AI, or at least
Huh.
publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an odd one because I hadn't thought about that until you literally had said. I think it's something that was like in a textbook or something. Like I've always heard it's always been biometrics, like eye or fingerprint, and then like UB keys, like something you have or something like that.
Mm,
Like that. There's a whole different smorgasbord of issues, like sometimes with the implementation of those tools too. But like, yeah, the voice one is, especially if it wasn't broken until recently. That's really curious because just like seems so inherently like on the same page as like the Captain Crunch whistle from like forever ago.
yeah.
Like what?
Like I was thinking you don't even need AI. Like I'm pretty sure like a good enough voice actor could just like imitate your voice. And like
Yeah.
this was the security system for bank accounts. Like in the UK,
Oh.
it was like uh they just basically called me and they're like, "Hey, would you like to set up our new secure authentication method?" And I was like, "What is it?" And it's like, "Well, as you're talking, we'll just listen to your voice and then we'll know it's you. And then that way you don't have to have a password." And I was like, "This is the worst thing I've ever heard of in my life."
What's the scene from the IT Crowd where the demolition truck is coming out and he's like, "What's the OS that the bomb truck runs on?" He goes, "Oh, it runs on Windows 98 or something." He goes, "Oh God, we're all gonna die." That's all
Yeah,
I can think
that
about
was
when
my feeling.
"Oh, we're doomed."
So we have a couple of questions from the viewers. I think will be like if you're watching the stream live, you can put in questions, and those should be passed to us so we can answer them. We already have some in here, and the first one is I am interested in participating in a hacking competition. I'm not sure where to begin or what resources to use. I think that's more of a you question because I'm pretty awful at CTF stuff.
Yeah, I would say with like a CTF, if you're really curious and you're eager to get into it, I would just go. Just go. I mean, fail early, fail fast, fail hard. Get the jitters out of the way because like your first CTF is probably going to be horrible anyways. That's just my opinion. And I mean, if you wanted to kind of stave off some of the embarrassment of like, not feeling like a square, which no one's going to be judging you. I'll be honest. As long as it's a good crowd you're with. If they're judging you, it's probably not like a CTF. You're probably going to look back on fondly anyways. Because most of the hacker community and most of the community that runs conferences and things like that and hosts CTFs, they'll have like an entry level CTF. That's more of like a game of Jeopardy style approach, right? Or when it comes to like a technical one, there's going to have graduated approaches. Usually, it's not like hardcore like DEF CON, like reverse the badge, which leads to this and this and this, right? Usually, that's not out the gate. So my advice would be just go, just try, learn, know that you're going to fail, have the expectation you're going to fail. The other thing I was going to say is if you want to try to stave off some of the initial, like, I have no idea what I'm doing, familiarize yourself with Linux, familiarize with Windows command line, learn how to use Nmap and some of the switches, learn how to use things like exploit DB to query or searchsploit to query like, kind of some pre-compiled or pre-listed vulnerabilities. Not technically pre-compiled, you'd have to compile them if it's on searchsploit, but that and like understanding some basics on Metasploit is what I would say.
Yeah, like I think I've done like maybe 3 or 4 CTFs in my life. And the one thing I've noticed is you can't really prepare for them. Like every CTF is different. And
Yep.
you can like, even if you're like actually really good at cybersecurity, I've like had ones where I've turned up and it'll be like, I'm not very good at cryptography. I'm good at like a lot of other things, but it'll be like cryptography. And I'll just be like, oh no. And and like you have stuff like Hack the Box where
Yeah.
you can see CTFs that people have made and you can just practice. But ultimately, there's always going to be that CTF you just I guess show up to, and it's not your jam.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the other thing I was going to say too, when you were talking about Hack the Box, like VulnHub back in the day, I used to download tons of those, and that was like my thing. Like I'm flying to a gig where we're going to be doing like some sort of like test, and we have to be on site. Cool, I'm going to download a VulnHub box, and like it was such like a mixed bag. To your point, like I was pretty good, I thought, right? So, you go in, you do your process, your flow, and you're like sitting here on like a 6-hour flight and you're like, I'm about to run out of battery and I haven't gotten a shell yet. I feel like an idiot. So it's going to happen, right? There's always going to be stuff to your point. So
Yeah, I think that reminds me of my first ever. I don't know if it was a CTF, but it was something in person, and I showed up with my my big beefy gaming laptop. Like high-end NVIDIA GPU, the light-up keyboard, and
Yes.
there was no power outlets. They had no power outlets in the room. Like that seems like bad forethought on their side, but
Yeah, totally.
I was like, oh no, I've got about 3 minutes before my fully charged laptop dies. And then someone came over and they're like, why don't you turn off the keyboard LEDs? That should save you about a minute.
Dude, you know it's funny too is like when those like I forget what it was. It was like Rise of Gamers or something like that. It was like one of the brands that they had at Best Buy, and I got that with one of my buddies in college. And we'd show up and we're like in class. Everyone's got like their MacBook Pro or like these very like subdued like ThinkPads, and I'm like, welcome to the rave, ladies and gents. About to get serious up in here.
Yeah. No, that was definitely me. Except of course the damn thing died after 3 minutes
Yeah.
and then I looked like
We're
an
like,
idiot.
and we get really super hot in like no time. Your lap is on fire. Like,
Yep, absolutely. So we have another question here. I have Security Plus and CISA Plus. I don't know how that's pronounced. As you can see, I'm very good at certs. But I'm really struggling to even get one interview after 200 plus applications. What am I doing wrong?
yeah, that's a tough one. I would say from my perspective, the resume is the single sheet of paper they're going to judge you off of. I know having interviewed people for, application security roles, for pen test roles, for red team roles, have been on like kind of the technical review for some SOC roles, the first thing that we will get is your resume. So, for me personally, this is just me, and I'm probably gonna get like booed and sheep sticked off the stage. But like, if the resume is really long, like I'm like not feeling the vibe already. It's like a vibe check for me. Like,
Mm,
my personal resume is one sheet, just one page. I list the most prevalent stuff at the very bottom is just like the dates I was there, what my role was in the company. And then like the last 2 to 3, I give like a little bit more. And then I have like my certs over to the side, like, like a race car, like my race car logos on the side of it to let you know what makes me go fast. And then like some of my like, social engagements, like mentor at GrimCon or whatever else. And then my personal information, because the idea is, if you're applying for a job, you should be applying for jobs that like, fit, your skill set and where you're at in your career. And then also you want them to be like, that's interesting. I'd like to talk to this individual. Right. So if it's like, let me tell you the story of how I left the Shire, all 7,000 pages. Like they're probably not going to be interested in that. So that's my personal pro tip. There's also ways that people have like kind of gamed the system. One of the best ones I've seen, if you're like really trying to like up the ante, is a lot of these HR systems will parse based off of, we
yeah.
want to have 7 to 10 years of exactly this one thing. I think you know what I'm going to say. I think
Yeah.
so. What people will do, and I'm not saying I've ever done this, is that they will take the job posting, they will put it in their resume, they will set the text to white on white, and then they will make it as small as possible. So then the computer's like, whoa, dude, this cat is 100% of a match. We should hire him. And then like, I've worked, 4 months at McDonald's before I flipped the fryer on somebody, which, I can imagine is probably a very stressful role. And that's why you should hire me as like your chief technical officer. So, and if HR is doing their job, they should be reading it. But, crazier things have happened where it's like, we require a CISSP, Security Plus, CISA Plus or whatever. And then like, it's not actually on your resume, but the system gave it a check mark and then HR passed it on. So
Yeah,
I'm
so
spicy.
that is the more I guess malicious advice,
Yeah.
but it is a very good point. There is a lot of automated resume scanning out there. Like you
Mm.
cannot expect that it is going to be a human who even reads your like at all. Like usually it goes through a system that does a first pass review, but there are some companies where they're just no human is actually going to read your resume. Like as Matt said, I would actually recommend like trying to incorporate the text from the job posting into your resume because they are looking for keywords. So if the job posting says 4 to 7 years of Swift or whatever, then just weave in like I don't know 10 years of Swift into there. Obviously, don't because it's not been around that long, but
Yeah.
um, you just gotta it's a bit of a system you have to play. You got
Yeah.
to get all of the keywords from that resume into your, well, not all of them, but as many as you can. And I also agree with the too long resume is not good.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing I maybe like, sure there's somewhere on the internet where you can find successful resumes. Like maybe there's a subreddit or something. So I would like definitely go out there and compare your resume to
Mhm.
what has worked for other people. Um, and I think there are actually people in cybersecurity who do offer like resume review classes. So
Yeah.
if you can find your way into one of those are like the most invaluable experience you can get.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a good point. And the other thing too, I would just throw out there, kind of like to dovetail off of what you were saying, is that when you look at your experience, think about what they're asking for and like how you might apply to that, right? Because they might say they want, 10 years or whatever of experience in security, and you might have been in a security role for the last 6, but before that, for 8 years, you were a sysadmin applying patches and running vulnerability scans. Like you might be able to play ball with that. Is kind of what I'm getting at. So don't sell yourself short as well. The other thing is, and this is the last thing I'll say on it, because um, it's I think it's an interesting problem that there's so many job openings, but then like so many people apply for things, is that it's a numbers game. If you put in 200 and you get back like 5, and then from those 5 you got one phone interview, you kind of know, well, this is the lay of the land for the market for the role that I want. So I need to go ahead and anticipate a way to just fan the hammer on these applications and do, maybe I need to do 600 to get where I want to be. And if it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, then you know what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually something I think that's worth adding is right now the market is not doing so hot. There's been like a lot of
Yes.
layoffs. There are a lot of people applying for jobs, and a lot of these people they recently got laid off of like Google, Apple, Microsoft, Twitter. Like they have the like big beefy work experience. So
Yeah.
there is kind of like a rush for positions, and if
Mhm.
they see someone who has had like like work experience in a similar position, they're probably going to go with them. But like as time goes on, that's going to fall off. Those people are going to get into the jobs they want,
Mhm.
and then they're going to move down the list. So I think it is really just persistence. You just got to keep at it, because like right now there is a huge surplus of candidates.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do we actually have any more questions? I can't see the live stream, unfortunately.
I will say also, I think that there is within Cybrary's Discord, we have a mentorship program or mentor program where we have individuals that essentially they're there as contact surfaces. I'm there. I pretty much lurk on the red team channel, obviously, and I'm always like, hey, let's talk about C2 frameworks. Um, reach out to the mentors. They can assist you also if you're within our Discord channels, and just ask like, hey, I've got this job I really want. This is the field I really want to get into, and I'm having a hard time getting my resume set together. So you can always reach out to the mentors that are in those channels and just say, hey, can you assist me with looking at my resume and let me know your feedback so that I have a better chance, or a swinging chance, right? To at least try to connect and get the job that I want. So that's something that's probably a pretty good call out as well. That that's out there. People are willing to help. Let me see if we have any questions that I can see. I don't see any, so I think maybe we're good. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I am not in the live, so I can't see questions, unfortunately. But I think, yeah, I think we've pretty much hit all our time right now. So that is it for our very first Intruder Alert podcast. Thanks so much for joining me, Matt. And if you would like to keep up with the podcast, I recommend subscribing to the YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, whatever it is you use, because we will be recording live. So you can join in. You can give us your questions in real time or your feedback. And yeah, and also we've got our cybery training. It's pretty much a lot of it is free right now. So if you want to sign up, learn a thing or two about cybersecurity, then cybrary.com and you can find training.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff out there. And I know that we do rotations with like things. If you're interested in like adversary emulation. I know that we do sometimes a rotation with the threat actor campaigns and stuff like that. So to your point, all the good stuff, but then also some commensurate stuff that's a little bit more thready.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.